Absolutely.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm John Clegg, Program Manager of the Office of Highway Safety, and I would like to welcome you all to the second day of the New Hampshire Impaired Driving Virtual Conference Series that begins today at 11 o'clock and goes to 1 p.m. today. So we got some great presentations lined up for everybody today. But before I continue, I'd like to just ask for a moment of silence for Officer Bradley Haas. Thank you very much. Officer Haas, again, will be truly remembered and missed. For those who are new to attending this conference, there's a wide range, again, of attendees to include dignitaries, legislators, law enforcement, prosecutors, and other important highway safety partners and stakeholders. Impaired driving on New Hampshire roads is a problem, and I just wanted to really kind of delve into the data a little bit before we kick this whole conference off, because I think it's really imperative, very important that we do discuss this because it is an issue. Impaired driving, again, continues to be a real problem on our roads. And to put things into perspective, in 21, there were 73 alcohol and/or drug-related crashes, which claimed 83 victims. That's 70.3% of the 118 fatalities that occurred in 2021. Also, of the 118 fatalities that occurred in 2021, 35.6% or 42 victims died as the result of an alcohol-related crash. Also in 21, drug tests came back positive for 58 operators involved in fatal motor vehicle crashes. That's 58 operators drug tests came back positive for in fatal motor vehicle crashes. In 2022, preliminary data is currently showing that there were 96 victims of an alcohol and/or drug-related crash. That's 65.8%. Out of the 146 fatalities in 2022 that were impairment-related fatalities. 65.8% of the 146 fatalities. As of November 20th, 2023, yesterday, fatality data shows that we have had 123 fatalities thus far in 23. So when I look at the number of fatalities, same period last year, we were around 120 fatalities. And as everyone may know, in 2022, we had 146 fatalities. So basically what that means is that we are on track to have the same number of fatalities in 2022 and here in 2023. So that's very concerning, obviously. But I also wanted everybody to know that I'm excited today because today we kick off, for the first time I think we've done this conference, we're kicking off a press conference on I-95 for the Blackout Wednesday initiative, NHTSA initiative. It's going to kick off on Wednesday, actually. The press conference is today. So basically, we also, on top of that initiative that NHTSA has for that Blackout Wednesday, it's going to start the 22nd. We have a Rockingham County initiative that's going to run within Rockingham County that incorporates over 30 police departments participating, or law enforcement agencies participating. That's local law enforcement, that's sheriff, county sheriff's departments, that's New Hampshire State Police as well, that are going to be out there conducting a regional DUI saturation effort. And again, we're using our law enforcement out there. We're using our DREs out there, drug recognition experts out there, and we're also using liquor enforcement to do last drink, place of last drink investigations as well. So we've got a lot going on in that county. It's going to be, again, kicking off the 22nd, November 22nd, and running through November 26th. So we're looking forward to this effort to remove some impaired drivers from our roadways to save lives for sure. So that's what I really wanted to get out there, the importance of what's going on out there with the data. the problem, the seriousness of the impaired driving issues on our roads, and what we're doing as an office to address, and with our partners to address this issue. We are going to continue to conduct with our partners these county, regional DUI saturation efforts in all the counties throughout the year, as well as we're going to be conducting high crash corridor saturation efforts on many of the corridors throughout the state, probably over 15 corridors throughout the state. So we are working very, very diligently with our partners to get that visibility out there on our roads to help change behaviors and whatnot. Now, before I continue, just a few things I wanted to cover. If anyone needs a certificate of attendance, please email Paul Ruggiero. His email will be in the chat box. Also, all sessions will be recorded and will be sent out to you after the series to review at your leisure. That's kind of what's nice about, you know, conducting these virtually. However, we are looking to have a conference next year where we're all going to meet and gather, have a nice luncheon, whatever, to be able to shake hands again and look each other in the face and have these nice conversations. So we look forward to that next year. Also as an attendee, your video is turned off and you're muted. You will only see the presenters, and there will be time for a Q&A at the end of each presentation. Please submit your questions through the chat feature on your screen, and don't be afraid to really get involved in some of these presentations. And if you have any questions, certainly that helps everybody else when, you know, certainly we have answers to these questions that helps others understand, you know, some of the issues or what we're doing to resolve some of the issues out there. So that's really important. Really appreciate that. So with that being said, I am very pleased to introduce to you Darby Van Amberg. She's with the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Laboratory, and Darby's going to talk a little bit about toxicology laboratory, state of the state. And just to tell you a little bit about Darby Van Amberg has a Bachelor of Science degree in Forensic Science from the University of Central Florida, and a Master of Science degree in Organizational Leadership from Southern New Hampshire University. Darby has been with the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Laboratory Toxicology Unit since 2005 and transitioned to the role of Unit Supervisor in 2019. She has spearheaded many projects over her nearly 2 decades in toxicology unit, to include validations of advanced analytical instrumentation, the addition of new drugs of abuse to the unit's testing panel, and the creation of the Summary of Positive Analytical Results, SPAR, program, which trains analysts to provide testimony outlining general effects of drugs on human performance based upon confirmatory findings reported by the laboratory. So with that being said, Darby, I hand it over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, John. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this chilly Tuesday before Thanksgiving. As John mentioned, I am with the State Police Forensic Laboratory Toxicology Unit and have been since 2005. I'm closing in on 20 years. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is the state of the state relative to toxicology testing. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my presentation. So to kick off today, I'll thank you for inviting me to speak. I certainly enjoy the opportunity to give some perspective into what we see in the laboratory and the things that we're doing to improve our services and connect with our customers and stakeholders. So to get started, today we're going to kind of go over a little bit about the unit, its composition and makeup. We'll talk some about the statistics of what we're seeing, both over a period of time and currently this year. We'll talk a little bit about our testing schematic, One of the prompts that I got for this year was to talk about the really great instrumentation that we use in the laboratory, which, to be honest, is not very exciting, maybe a little bit boring. So I'm going to try to give you some insight into what kinds of instrumentation we use, what we use them for, and how old they are, how long we've had them, and some of their advantages. I would like to also cover some of the challenges that we're encountering in the toxicology testing or unit in terms of both meeting our customer needs and being able to move the unit forward in a positive direction. And then finally, I'd like to cover some of the changes that are upcoming / in progress that I think will improve our service to our customers and hopefully streamline a lot of the roadblocks and barriers that people can encounter when it comes to toxicology testing. I'm sure everybody can think of a news story or a death or whatever where it's always pending toxicology. And so that's not my favorite phrase. So I would like to, have us be ready and raring to go rather than the thing that's holding up an investigation. So to begin, looking at the unit, we currently have 8 full-time analysts, although that includes me, which I don't get into the laboratory to do as much analytical bench work as I used to. So really 7 plus some. But that's a great number. We're really getting people trained. We have some new individuals, and as they get trained, we continue to see improvements in our turnaround times and reductions in our backlogs. So that's really helping quite a bit. So we currently are receiving only DUI and Department of Corrections samples. Prior to maybe mid 2023, we also received samples from the medical examiner's office relative to untimely deaths or overdoses, things like that. But the medical examiner's office elected to stop bringing samples to us as a laboratory and send them out to National Medical Services. And this really made some sense because National Medical Services is a huge facility that has a very large test panel and really could better meet the needs of the medical examiner's office when it comes to things like detecting novel drugs or upcoming drugs that we don't have validated yet here in the laboratory. So things like xylazine, we're not testing for that right now. So it really made more sense for the medical examiner to send their samples out, which more power to them. I think they will find it beneficial in their testing. So that leaves us with DUI and Department of Corrections. Department of Corrections, we actually test mainly urine samples for people that are incarcerated or are on probation and parole to see if they're in compliance with the parameters of their release and things like that. So, but for this presentation, certainly we're focusing more on the DUI aspect and the highway safety aspect of things. So we currently have a DUI-centered test panel of about 35 drugs and metabolites. When I talk about the medical examiner sending things to National Medical Services, the panel is much larger, hundreds of drugs and analytes, and that's just something that with our funding and the size of our laboratory is not feasible. So we skew towards coming up with methods for drugs that are highly abused, that are potentially impairing, and getting that information to law enforcement agencies. We also provide testimony to analytical results. We have sort of a two-tier testimony system in the toxicology unit where everybody is fully trained in all analytical techniques and is able to testify to those techniques as well as the results that are generated from them. And then more senior analysts go through additional training in order to testify to the general effects of drugs on human performance. So there's a separate training protocol that all analysts that would testify to those, I think John touched on it, those SPAR reports or that summary of positive analytical results report. Those are things that only the additionally trained analysts would be able to talk about. We certainly provide training and presentations to law enforcement personnel and key stakeholders, as I'm doing right now. We also provide education at A-Ride, the DRE school, at-scene car training, and PSNT. So we're sort of all over the place educating as much as we can. And then certainly we provide statistical data for various functions, and I do monthly statistics that go up the chain of command here at safety. And then if there's a particular initiative coming forward, then I may be asked to pull specific data for that. So I do that as well. Now, getting on to statistics, everybody's favorite topic. So we'll have a general overview of the toxicology unit, then certainly our backlogs. I think those are pretty telling when you see them over the course of the year. And then for us, something that is actually really impactful is court. So I think people will be surprised a little bit on the court statistics. So this is an overview of DUI specific number of cases that have come in over the past 5 years, as well as how many tests were performed. So BACs and then drug screens. The drug screen is a presumptive positive. Anything that shows positive on that then goes on for more specific confirmation tests. So you'll see the sort of reflexive purple is tests that were based upon things that were found in the green. And then the SPAR, which we actually only just started in 2020. So those are increasing as well over time. These are the specific drug driving trends. 2023 is to date, and I think through October. And you can see, I know there's a lot of talk around legalization of marijuana and what kind of impact that will have, things like that. But for the past more than 5 years, I just didn't include it, so the slide didn't seem too busy, but it's been our number one drug that we're finding in the driving population, those people that are pulled over for impaired driving. So we're seeing it all day, every day. And certainly fentanyl is number 2, which is pretty scary considering how impairing fentanyl can be. The other category includes some less well-known things like Ambien, your sleep aids, barbiturates, which are prescribed for migraines and potentially epilepsy. So those lesser well-known that sort of all go into one catch-all category. But yeah, in marijuana it's here, and we're seeing it. So just for what what might be coming down the pike, I don't know, but it is here already. We're surrounded, so maybe not super surprising. Moving along to backlogs and turnaround times. So at the end of 2022 and into early 2023, you can see our backlogs and turnaround times were not great. Never in my career have we had 500 samples pending BAC analysis, and I hope to never see that again. It was a sort of perfect storm of events where people had left and we were trying to get new people trained, and it just, while we're doing the training, we're also pulling other analysts away from regular casework so they can train the new people. But as we've trained new people, and we start with BACs and then we move on to drug screens and confirmations, things like that, you can see very clearly the backlogs tanked. They went way down, which was lovely. So I credit that to the new folks coming in and really, being hard workers, little worker bees that just go through sample after sample, which is lovely. And so as a result of that, certainly our turnaround times for coming in the door and then going out as reported have continued to decrease as well. Our goal is always to see both of these numbers as low as possible. I think we will get there. We still have more training to do of the new folks. Our training, I'll touch on later, is it's a lengthy process. So, but incremental change is still good change in the right direction anyway. So these are our court totals for this year so far. Our unit of 8 people has received 980 subpoenas. That's a lot. definitely more than the rest of the laboratory combined. If you think about other units like the biology unit that does the DNA testing, or pattern evidence that does fingerprint testing, a lot of the cases that they actually go and testify about or during the trial for are kind of high profile cases that have, you know, a 2-week superior court time set aside, and they're kind of few and far between. DUI cases are all the time, and they're at lower courts and at the district level or administrative license suspension hearings. So we are testifying, or we're subpoenaed a lot. We testify significantly less. You can see that for the 980 subpoenas we actually received so far this year, we've only had to appear 100 times and given about half as much testimony. So it's still an impact, definitely. Driving somewhere and back and not testifying. It's all hours away from the laboratory, which you can see what the impact is there. And it doesn't seem significant, but in comparison, I think to other units within the laboratory, it definitely has an impact on our time. So that covers statistics, and I would like to pivot to testing. So our current testing schematic is something called stop limit testing. And basically what that means is you start with your BAC analysis, and if the sample result is at a certain threshold, you don't go on to do any more drug testing or a drug screen or any confirmations. And the reason a lot of laboratories actually use stop limit testing, and it's a combination of, you know, using resources wisely, what you have in terms of available manpower and instrumentation, how many samples you're getting, things like that. In our state, that we don't have enhanced penalties for somebody that was over the limit on alcohol and also doing drugs. So it's not necessarily beneficial from a prosecution perspective, although it might be. So we start at a BAC analysis, and when we get a result, is the result over a 0.100. So the per se limit is 0.08. So we give it to 0.1. If it's over that, our testing is complete. If it's under that, then we move on to the drug screen. And again, that's the presumptive positive, and anything that shows up positive on the screen goes on for a more specific confirmation test. So that's our current testing schematic. Like I said, stop limit testing is employed by a lot of toxicology laboratories for all those reasons I mentioned before. So now we can flip over into the really exciting world of instrumentation. I'm sure, you know, these things look foreign, but we have each of these kinds of instruments in our toxicology laboratory, and we use each of them for different kinds of testing. So I wanted to cover what each one does, and what the advantages are, and what kind of data we see from it, without getting too technical. So I don't want to lose anybody in the audience. So we have the gas chromatograph flame ionization detector, the liquid chromatograph mass spectrometer with time of flight detector. I think I always laugh when I say the full name of these, because we have to say the full name in court, and it's just a mouthful and it means nothing to anybody, but that's the appropriate name. So gas chromatograph with a mass spectrometer, and a liquid chromatograph with a triple quadruple detector. So those are the 4 types of instrumentation that we utilize mainly in the toxicology unit for all of our testing. So to start, we have that gas chromatograph flame ionization detector. So we actually use this for our blood alcohol analysis. We currently have 2 of these in the laboratory, and the ages of the instruments are 7 and 15 years. So they're definitely getting up there in age. The advantages of this instrumentation are that it's really pretty easy from a scientific perspective how they work. They're very reliable. They're sturdy, if you will, and they're used mostly for simple compounds that don't, you know, they're not complex compounds. So if you look at the chemical structure I have there on the slide, that's actually the chemical structure of ethanol. pretty basic. Everything's kind of in a straight line. Not too many different compounds are present. So that's what we would call a sort of simple molecule. And then to the right, the quantitative alcohol report there, that's the kind of data that we see generated by the instrument pursuant to testing. So this screenshot that I've showed actually is one of the controls that we run as part of our daily quality control. And you can see that there are 5 different peaks on that data. And each one of those peaks represents a different volatile compound that we look for as part of our alcohol analysis. So there we have methanol, which is an industrial grade alcohol. We have ethanol, which is what you would find in an alcoholic beverage. So when somebody talks about, generally when they refer to alcohol, they mean ethanol. Isopropanol is the same thing as rubbing alcohol. Acetone is what you would find in nail polish remover, and the N-propanol is actually something that we add to the sample as what we call an internal standard, and it just normalizes all of the rest of the compounds that we're looking for. So you can see that we look for different kinds of volatile compounds, and we do that on purpose. Anybody that is familiar with blood draws for DUIs, there are very specific rules about not using a non-alcoholic cleanser for the skin, all those kinds of things. But if somebody were to use a rubbing alcohol or isopropanol swab for the blood draw, you can see very clearly that we can differentiate easily between the isopropanol and the ethanol that would be part, in the blood from having had alcoholic beverages. So moving on to the LC-MS-TOF, this is the instrumentation that we actually use for our drug screens. Again, this is just a quick kind of positive negative. We currently have 2 of these in the laboratory. Anybody that was around in 2021 might remember that this was the instrumentation that was down for almost 5 months and really, really backed us up in terms of testing. So now we have 2 of them. So if one goes down, we have the other. So that is a lifesaver. And this is where we have more complex compounds that we're kind of looking for. The analyte, or the drug, that chemical structure that's on screen, is actually alprazolam, so Xanax. Some of you might be familiar with that. So it's more complex than the ethanol, certainly. There's rings, there's a chlorine on there, nitrogens, none of the things that were on that simple ethanol molecule. Some of the advantages that come along with using this kind of instrumentation for your drug screen is that you can actually target your compounds, and you could look for things individually rather than as a whole drug class, which is helpful. This also has very easy sample preparation. There's not a lot of time. It's not a time-intensive preparation to get the samples onto the instrument. And you can see an example of the data that we see as part of the instrumentation next to it. And we have several different compounds listed on there, but that's just sort of an example of what we see when we do a drug screen. Again, this is a quality control standard that I put on as far as an example of the data. So we're seeing a lot of the A compounds because they come off alphabetically. Moving on to GCMS, these are used for drug confirmation analyses. So after we do the drug screen, anything that's positive goes on for that more specific confirmation test. These are the instruments that we use for most of our confirmation tests. We currently have 4 of them in the laboratory, and the ages are pretty wide. We're coming up on 20 years for our oldest GCMS. They absolutely, for decades, have been considered the gold standard when it comes to toxicology testing. They're very robust. They're relatively simple in terms of the scientific theory behind it and maintaining them. So everybody really likes GCMS. Some of the disadvantages that are starting to appear that we need more sensitivity in the instrumentation, and the GCMS can't always provide that. So, but it's good for those complex molecules. The chemical structure you're seeing right there is methamphetamine, which goes along with that data right next to it. So when we see or when there's methamphetamine in a sample. That's the kind of data that is produced by the GCMS in terms of how much is there and whether or not it meets the criteria for identification as methamphetamine. And then lastly, we use something similar to GCMS, but rather than injecting a gas or vaporizing a sample, we inject a liquid. So that's the difference between GC and LC, gas versus liquid. So our liquid, our LC-MS triple quad, is also used for drug confirmation analyses. And this instrumentation is actually used for things that we need more sensitivity. For example, before we had an LC-MS triple quad, our fentanyl confirmation was on the GCMS, and the lowest level that we could report was 1 nanogram per milliliter. And when we got the LC-MS triple quad and we moved the fentanyl confirmation and revalidated it on that new instrumentation that has higher sensitivity, we actually can now, the lowest number that we can report for fentanyl is 0.1 nanograms per milliliter. So that's a 10-fold difference in sensitivity for this particular instrumentation, which can be significant when you're looking at these low levels of drugs. So we currently have 2 of these in the laboratory, and they're 4 and 7 years old, give or take. And I think, the chemical structure you're seeing there is clonazepam. So this is Klonopin for those that don't know the trade name, but and an example of the data that we see generated from something analyzed on the LC-MS triple quad. So that's the instrumentation that we use. It's standard for us, but it's exciting, I think, for others. They certainly look very intimidating, but we receive a lot of training on these instruments and the maintenance of them and how to use them. So the majority of us are, pretty comfortable in using them. So pivoting over to some of the challenges that the toxicology, and the laboratory in general, challenges that we experienced. Certainly, laboratory space is a big one for us. Traditionally, we've had toxicology specifically, we have challenges of staffing and instrumentation. And right now, we're actually in pretty good shape for those 2 things. What we're finding as our limiting factors are actually the laboratory space. It's I know that most people, you can see behind me, I took a picture of the laboratory space this morning. So that's my my background. You can have a little glimpse into the laboratory, but basically it's repurposed office space. This facility was not ever meant to be a laboratory. So it's sort of retrofitted to meet the needs of the laboratory. We have the toxicology unit has about 3,500 square feet allocated, but there was a needs assessment done several years ago in hopes of getting a new laboratory facility built. And the recommendation for the toxicology laboratory was 5,000 square feet. So, we're operating in a small space. We have an aging air handling system that definitely can impact our ability to perform tests. The environment, the temperature controls and things like that have to be regular. But with the age of the building and the age of the units and things like that, that's not always the way it goes. So, and then certainly electrical needs. We have not all of our instrumentation is able to be on the emergency backup power for the building because there's not enough space. So we have to choose which instrumentation is on emergency power, which really all of it should be on emergency power. And then there's actually no room on the regular electrical panel for any more instrumentation in the laboratory. So we wouldn't be able to get a new instrument without getting rid of or making some tough choices about other things and making room on the electrical panel. So, that's certainly a roadblock for us in some regards as well. Then we move on to aging equipment. I think, in showing you the instrumentation that we have, as well as their relative ages. One of those the BAC instruments and one of those GCMS confirmation instruments are actually running Windows 2008. So there's no saving that. You know, if the computer dies, we don't have a way to get that instrument back up and running at this point, because the instruments are so old. I mean, that's one thing that we're finding is a limiting factor for us. Certainly, we definitely look to replace instruments as they get old, but the instrumentation for the toxicology laboratory runs between $100,000 and $300,000, depending on what instrument you're looking at. Some of those more complex things are the more expensive things. The simpler instrumentation like the GCFID might be more closer to the $100,000 range, but that's still a significant purchase. So yeah, we try to limp things along until we can replace them. But certainly as I said before, that the facility is a limiting factor. The air handling unit on the roof is almost 20 years old, and I do a lot of emailing the temperature in the lab is too hot. So those kinds of things are impactful for sure, because at some point when things get too hot, it's not safe to be in the laboratory with chemicals. The instruments certainly have operating parameters that the temperature needs to stay within. So those kinds of things are impactful. We also have walk-in evidence fridge and freezers. Those are all aging as well. You know, they don't make them like they used to. They say that for a reason. So we're definitely kind of keeping an eye on things and keeping our fingers crossed that we don't run into any major problems. But with time, things just kind of break down. And then another challenge we have is meeting our customer needs. We know that we have a limited test panel. It's 35 drugs and metabolites. We would love to increase it. We want to meet the needs of the customer, but it takes time to validate new methods and put new drugs into our test panel. When we were having when carfentanil was up and coming, that's when we got our LC triple quad, and we worked to move that methodology over onto that instrument so we could see carfentanil and report it. And I myself and another analyst worked on that exclusively, that method, validating it for I think 5 months. And it was an intense, and that was quick. That was us dedicating our time to getting it done. So it takes a lot to validate new methods, and traditionally we just don't have the time. And then still, keep on track of, or keep on top of backlogs and lowering turnaround times, understanding that there are court deadlines that need to be met, things like that. So we try to balance putting a new drug online and keeping the turnaround times low. So it's a delicate, complicated dance. A challenge, maybe less of a challenge and more of an impact, would be our training program. So in the toxicology unit, we train in modules. So we start with BACs, you train in those, and then when you complete that module, you're able to do BAC casework while you start training on the next module, which is traditionally drug screens, and so on and so forth. But to complete all of that analytical testing training takes a year, give or take, which is significant. And then all of our analysts are also expected to perform what's called a peer technical and administrative review of other analysts' work. But you can only get trained in that after you've been doing a particular analysis for a year. So another year, give or take, to train in all of the peer reviews. So really complete and total training in the unit takes roughly 2 years. But you are able to do casework in the interim. So I think we're fortunate in that regard, but it does sort of mean, as the training is ongoing, you're taking other analysts away from their casework so they can train you, those kinds of things. And then court can be a challenge just from the sheer volume perspective. 980 subpoenas means reaching out to prosecutors and courts a lot to find out, is this really going forward? Do you really need me? Can I be on call? So it is some upfront effort on our part, but I will say that we have a really good a lot of good relationships with prosecutors in terms of just letting us be on call. And when the trial starts, they let us know and we hop in the car and we're there in plenty of time to testify. So that is most appreciated because it allows us to stay at the laboratory until the last possible minute doing work until you need us and to testify. So those are some of the bigger challenges that we see in our unit, and certainly the laboratory space is across the board. It's not just toxicology that has this aging air handling system or is working in repurposed office space. The entire laboratory has that issue. So here's some upcoming changes, and these are pretty exciting, and I hope everybody else is excited about them. So we are actually going to get rid of stop limit testing. January 1st, we are going to be doing BAC and drug screens on everything that comes in for at least, per case. And this is the first time we're moving away from this model basically ever. So I think what I hope is that we're going to be able to better meet the needs of the customer. We're going to be offering more information, certainly from a prosecutorial perspective, when it comes to the amount of alcohol and the drugs that might have been present. And then also providing more complete data to our partners and stakeholders in places like highway safety. When we do stop limit testing, there's about 40% of our cases, DUI cases, that never go on for drug testing. And that's a significant number because you can't get a full picture of what is happening in the driving population in New Hampshire without that testing. So come January 1st, we're gonna be getting rid of stop limit testing. We're gonna go on to do the drug screen. And one advantage of this is that there's no wait time. So when something comes in the door and is logged in, we're gonna be ordering that BAC and the drug screen at the same time. We don't have to do the BAC and wait to see what the result is before we decide about doing a drug screen. So that should hopefully streamline our process, get your turnaround times down. We're looking to add some new drugs to our test panel. There are national recommendations for the scope of testing when it comes to laboratories performing DUI testing. We're pretty darn close to meeting those. We need to add the metabolite for buprenorphine, and then we need to add a test method for tramadol, and then we'll be right in line with the national recommendations. So those are going to be the first things on our list of things to add. And we're going to start working on those, immediately, essentially. So we, this year, 2023, have transitioned to paperless. So the laboratory, the toxicology unit, is basically 100% digital at this point. And really, this has streamlined our data processing and how analysts look at their data. It all lives in our laboratory information management system, which is cloud-based, so we don't have to worry about running out of storage. From the review side, when we do a peer review, a technical and administrative review of another analyst's work, everything is right there on the computer screen. We don't have to go hunt down folders. We don't have to find people, put out APBs on who had some folder last. And certainly with the advent of this digital aspect and VPNs, it has allowed people to work from home, do some overtime from home when it comes to just the data and paperwork, because it's all accessible right there on a laptop, which is very advantageous. So our hope is that, we're going to continue to decrease those backlogs and turnaround times based on our transition to paperless. And then lastly, if you don't know, with this transition to digital and paperless has come an update to our laboratory information management system called Portal. And what this will do is certainly I think it's going to help on both ends. On the front end, it's going to allow police agencies to pre-log their evidence. So you go into portal, you enter your suspect, your type of evidence, the test that you want, your department case information, and it's all pre-logged. You bring your evidence to the laboratory, they double check that everything matches, and they click accept, and there you go, it's done. So on the front end, it's certainly going to streamline the process. And then on the back end, agencies will be able to log into portal and see whether or not there are reports that are available because the testing has been completed. So instead of having to call the laboratory and say, where is this, how long, you can just log into portal, see if there's another report available for you to download, and then you're off and running. So really, it's quicker customer service on both ends, hopefully. So those are definitely some of the bigger changes that are upcoming or are in progress already. If you are interested, if your agency you think would be interested in chatting or learning more about Portal, I can actually here the contact slide. You can send an email to the general lab email there, nhsplab@dos.anh.gov, and just indicate that you're looking for information about Portal, and it will get to the right folks to, maybe you can be a pilot agency, or you'd like to investigate how to get connected, things like that. So with that, these are all of our unit members, all of our emails, and the general lab number for any questions, queries. We're always happy to answer questions and educate if you have questions. So contact us at any time. And then with that, I think that's my time. So does anybody have questions?
Yeah, we have a question that came over email.
Okay.
It's how many tests are run through your lab annually?
So if in total, we get for DUI, we get about 1,500 cases. And then looking back to those slides, if you want to look, I'm going to scroll back here to the overview. So for example, in 2022, we got just over 1,500 DUI cases. On those cases, we performed like 1,800 BACs, and then an additional 600 drug screens and 1,000 confirmations. So just adding 18, math is hard, over a couple thousand. It depends on the year. Certainly, most people aren't using just one drug. So, when we do a drug screen, often we'll have to do like a cannabinoid confirmation for THC and maybe a fentanyl confirmation because it was positive for two things. So, but it varies from year to year. Certainly, 2020 obviously was, not a lot of highway enforcement happening that year for obvious reasons.
There's another one that says, is your budget part of the police department budget? I imagine they mean state police budget.
Yeah, our budget is kind of a yes and no. We have control over our own budget, but it's all part of safety. And then our funding sources are part highway funds and part general funds.
Okay. Also, there's another one. Do you have any idea what the conviction rates are for drivers that have a BAC over 0.08 or positive drug test?
I don't. Most often, our involvement generally ends at testimony. We generally don't know what the outcome of the case was.
Okay. Seems that's it.
All right.
Darby,
anybody
thanks
have
so
any
much.
comments?
I think you do a fantastic job, Darby, up there.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, Darby, that was an excellent presentation, excellent information. And as an office, the Office of Highway Safety, and even our partners too listening in, I mean, just to see the workload that you have coming in, to be able to deal with it through the toxicology program, it's it's immense. And certainly I know the office has helped in the past with equipment and whatnot, but it really kind of gives us an idea of where you're at. See the backlogs coming down a little bit. I love the fact that January 1st, the removal of the stop limit testing is going to happen. So it'd be great to see a more timely compilation of data maybe to help the office and other partners out there. So just want to say thank you. That was an excellent presentation.
Yeah, no problem. I forgot to mention too, when talking about other partners, that we had a lunch and learn presentation recently from the New Hampshire Information and Analysis Center, who put together statistics and relating to drug use in the state. That they derive the data from our drug chemistry unit and what they're seeing in the actual physical drugs that they receive. And so we have opened conversations with them about providing them data relative to DUIs as well. So that can help them to provide data to the stakeholders to inform decisions on, mitigation efforts or saturation patrols, all those kinds of things. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, exactly right.
Too.
With the timeliness of the data coming in, certainly we can deploy those resources to address some of the issues, as quickly as possible once we have that information. So you're a huge partner of ours, and just want to thank you so much. It was a great presentation again.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. So next up, we have Ian Marsh. And Paul Ruggiero. Ian Marsh is going to be talking a little bit about the state analyst fatality analysis reporting system, and giving us a little information on that for sure. And then Paul Ruggiero is going to be talking about the New Hampshire Office of Highway Safety. He's a New Hampshire Office of Highway Safety Law Enforcement Liaison. He's going to talk about FARS. State of FARS data and highway safety methodology. And just to give you a little bio of Ian. Ian is program specialist for the New Hampshire FARS program. Ian has worked at New Hampshire Division of Motor Vehicles for over 7 years, with 4 of those years being involved in collecting information and statistics on fatal traffic crashes within New Hampshire. And so appreciate everything that Ian does as well. And I just want to quickly give Paul Ruggiero's, our very own Paul Ruggiero, his bio. Paul Ruggiero is a retired police officer from Massachusetts. During his career, he was assigned to his department's traffic enforcement and crash investigation unit. He was selected by the U.S. Department of State to deploy with the United Nations International Police Task Force, where he was tasked with reconstructing police forces in countries debilitated by war. He departed the UN mission as a captain in charge of the UN BIH Traffic Officer Certification Program. Upon returning to his police department, he held the position of field training officer until his retirement. Post-retirement, he worked at the U.S. Army National Training Center at Fort Irwin, California, developing scenario-based training for soldiers deploying to international peacekeeping missions. Upon returning to New Hampshire, he has worked at the New Hampshire DOT Traffic Management Center, and for the past 7 years has worked for the New Hampshire DOS Office of Highway Safety as a law enforcement liaison assigned to special projects. And we were so fortunate to have Paul and certainly Ian as well. So I'm going to let you guys decide who's going to talk first. And with that, I hand it over to you. Thank you.
I think Ian's still muted here. Stand
Yeah, so I did mention when you're trying to figure that out, Paul, I did mention the press conference on I-95. Maybe that's over now. I don't know. It started at 11 o'clock on I-95. So many of our partners are going to be there, probably the liquor enforcement. I think the commissioner is going to be there. Press is going to be there for sure. So if you tune to WMUR tonight or any media outlet, you might hear a little bit about that press conference and the fact that, we're trying to address the impairment on New Hampshire roads for sure. And we have many partners involved in doing just that from November 22nd to November 26th. So with that, looks like Ian, looks like you're all set. No, looks like you still have the mute issue, sound issue. And some of the other things, just to let everybody know, I know I talk about the corridor enforcement efforts, but aside from that impairment initiative that's going to kick off, for Rockingham County on November 22nd through the 26th, we're going to be having, drive sober get pulled over from December 13th through January. We're also going to have that same drive sober get pulled over, the impaired driving campaign kick off in August as well. So with that being said, this initiative being said in November, along with, we probably have over 200 agencies just conducting regular grant-funded impairment-related enforcement efforts just off of a grant, just regular DUI enforcement. I think we're going to really be visible out there trying to address impairment.
Still working on it. Stand by, please.
Yep. Again, I'll just elaborate a little bit more on the impairment issue. This is the regional DUI and the corridor saturation efforts. This is not new to our partners, not new to the Office of Highway Safety. And the reason why I want to mention this is back in 2010, we have had our lowest fatality year. Back then, I believe that was 90, but back then we were doing these regional efforts, we were doing these corridor saturation efforts, and I can say that it's not like reinventing the wheel. We had some wonderful, great results from these regional efforts and these corridor saturation efforts. So that visibility really makes a difference out there. And when you combine that with messaging, outreach, and whatnot, that really starts to reduce those overall crashes, which reduces again those overall fatalities and serious injuries. How are we looking, Paul?
He's gonna try and leave the room and come back in.
Okay.
Probably something with the connection.
All right. I think everyone's heard on the, I mentioned at the opening of, I think, the first series. As I mentioned yesterday, there's such an issue with the impairment out there on our roads. I'm sure you've all been watching the news. You've all seen.
Ooh, can everybody hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we
Hello?
can, Ian.
Oh, awesome. Just a little bit of a technical hiccup there.
Oh.
And can everybody see my contents?
Yes, we can.
All right. All right, so I will start off. As John had said in the intro, my name is Ian Marsh. I am the head of the FARS program here at New Hampshire DMV. Our goal is to report and analyze fatal crash data and to assist other state agencies in using this data to more effectively get messaging out there and focus on basically improving safety on our roadways. So what is FARS? FARS is an acronym which stands for the Fatality Analysis Reporting System. And what that acronym, basically the message of it, or the history of it, I guess you could say, is it was established in 1975 by the National Center for Statistics and Analysis, which was a branch of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. A little bit of history regarding NHTSA. Following the signing of the Highway Safety Act by President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1966 and the creation of the Federal Department of Transportation in 1967, NHTSA was established in 1970 and was tasked with the reduction of deaths and injuries from motor vehicle crashes. Clearly, it was getting to a point in this country where motor vehicle traffic fatalities and accidents was becoming a problem, and we needed to devise a method on the federal end to kind of try and curb that and combat that, find better solutions for taking away serious bodily injuries and fatalities. It was created to help improve road and highway safety standards through standardized data collection on fatal motor vehicle accidents. And a little offset on that, a big way that FARS and NHTSA has kind of helped go through this is they did establish what is called the Model Minimum Uniform Crash Criteria, MMUCC, which we call MUC. It was first developed in 1998, and it was created to provide state and local law enforcement and other traffic safety agencies just with a standard set of motor vehicle traffic crash data variables. So creating this basically made it so not every state and agency came up with their own way of reporting data, which would, of course, if you're collecting it from all 50 states, make it really difficult to drill down and kind of analyze it. That way, everybody kind of has the same set of criteria that they are reporting by, which makes it easier and more effective to analyze this data at a state and federal level. So MUC has been updated 4 times over history, in 2003, 2008, 2012, and 2017. We are currently in what is known as MUC 5, just the 5th edition of it, which is kind of the most precise and data-rich version of it yet. I guess one example of this data standardization is there's a field on a basic police report, which does indicate injury. The system that we use for that we call KABCO, which KABCO. Each letter kind of stands for a degree of injury, with K being killed, A being serious injury, B being minor injury, C being possible injury, and O being no injury at all. So basically, every state that has these MUC police reports goes by that. That way, we don't really have too many discrepancies, and it's that guideline that makes it easier to kind of assess. So what are the general goals of FARS? So the FARS program wants to create a system of measuring safety on highways overall. It also looks to identify and report recurring safety concerns using fatal accident data. They're trying to use that fatal accident data to propose solutions to address overall road safety. And FARS is also looking to improve motor vehicle and highway safety standards. This is definitely the main goals of the program on a federal level, but we also utilize that data on a more immediate state level to do this as well. How is FARS data used? So fatal traffic accident data is collected from every state and coded into RBIS, which is the online record. RBIS stands for Record-Based Information Solution. And it is the NHTSA program that all FARS units report each fatal crash case into. Data is distributed via information requests to government agencies, Congress, automobile manufacturers, insurance companies, independent safety research organizations, the news media, and private citizens. FARS data over time has been used to research and improve legislation involving alcohol, motorcycle helmets, and restraint usage, vehicle and airbag safety designs, and safety for larger and commercial motor vehicles. So basically the way that the FARS works overall is each state has a cooperative agreement between themselves and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA. And due to that cooperative agreement, each state has one or many analysts. In the state of New Hampshire, I am the only FARS analyst, just because relatively the amount of traffic crashes, fatalities that we experience, it doesn't really compare to some of the larger states like Florida, Texas, California. So there is assigned one person to kind of handle all this. That is me. So data is gathered from the state source documents for each fatal accident, which I will kind of touch on in a later slide what those source documents are. Specific information is broken down into raw data elements. That's where that MUC comes in. It sets that standardized guideline. So the elements and terminology used are kind of uniform, as in the name. The data elements reported by each state and recorded through the FARS record system, the RBIS system, into individual crash files. So there's a digital file basically for every single fatal traffic accident that occurs in the state, and there's the digital record of it in that system. So FARS utilizes a data dictionary that is 1,000+ pages. It assigns kind of numerical values to all data elements found in these source documents. Once the data is entered, it is monitored via rules and consistency checks within the program. So if you put in data from a police report that kind of doesn't check out logically or maybe misreported, the RBIS program will give you an edit check saying, this is most likely unlikely, please go back and review this or look it over for more information. And then that allows for more consistency when that data is being reported in. It's then reviewed again by a team of people at NHTSA to verify the quality of the data provided. Generally, that is done after the close of the year. NHTSA and their QC go through a pretty heavy process to verify that everything does look accurate. If there is anything that it's kind of a tough question or it's a tricky situation that's not necessarily covered within that FARS data dictionary, which these situations actually do occur. I've experienced a few of these. There is kind of a centralized help desk that we can submit tickets into to have a team of experts kind of look over the crash, determine what the best way of coding the crash is, and what the kind of resolution to the issue is. So what qualifies as a fatal traffic accident? For a motor vehicle fatality to be reported in FARS, it does have to meet a certain amount of qualifications. Firstly, it must involve at least one motor vehicle traveling on a public roadway maintained primarily for travel. That motor vehicle must experience what's called an unstabilized situation, which means a harmful event occurs on the roadway, which was not intended. It also, of note, it cannot happen during a cataclysm, which is a major natural disaster, landslide, hurricane, tornado, flash flood, something like that. If somebody is killed in one of those events, it's not considered a fatal traffic accident. The victim must pass away within 720 hours from the date of crash, which is always it can cause confusion sometimes on different levels. I know a lot of people think that if the victim doesn't immediately pass away at the scene, well, is it really a fatal traffic accident? According to the definition set forward by NHTSA, yes, it definitely is. The victim also must pass away because of the injuries sustained during the crash. So we do run into situations where somebody will have a various medical event, heart attack, something like stroke, something like that behind the wheel. If it is determined that that individual did die before the impact happens, it's not considered a fatal traffic accident. It's something that we do monitor, but it's not reported or included in the fatality stats. And then the other big thing is a victim's death cannot be the result of a deliberate intent, which is homicide, suicide, I guess it would go against the definition of it being an accident, which is unintended. So those are also not included in our numbers. Of note, even the stuff that doesn't qualify as a FARS case, NHTSA is looking to track. They also have a program called NTS, which stands for Non-Traffic Surveillance. It's designed to provide counts and details regarding non-traffic fatalities and injuries. Examples of that are some of the stuff prior mentioned, or events that happen on kind of what's considered non-public roadways, which by NHTSA, that is considered certain areas of parking lots. Generally, if it occurs in a stall or an aisle of a parking lot, it's not considered a roadway by NHTSA's definitions, so it wouldn't be a FARS case, but it is something that they are looking to collect data on. The same applies to stuff that happens on driveways and public properties, or adjacent to public properties. NHTSA is definitely focused more recently on collecting this. I go to a national training every year, and at the last one we went to, they did stress that one thing that they're seeing more of that aren't FARS cases, but it has been on the rise, so they're trying to track our front and back overs, which just includes people being run over in driveways, parking lots that aren't being seen. They want to address that to try and improve safety systems going forward with the manufacturers. And it is something that, while we don't report it in their stats, they very much want that data from us so they can kind of have sufficient data to move forward and divide these strategies. So what do I do as a FARS analyst? So to break it down into a few data points, one of the first things I do is I compile a physical file for each New Hampshire fatal traffic accident. These do only include accidents that occur on New Hampshire public roadways. I do get a question, well, what if a New Hampshire resident dies just across the border in another state? Then it falls to the Mass FARS analysts, the Vermont FARS analysts, the Maine FARS analysts, so on. We only care about accidents that are happening within each respective state. The other thing, or the next main step, I guess, is I report fatal traffic accident information to the federal FARS program via the RBIS system, and that includes breaking the case down and coding it in by that data dictionary. I do maintain a running spreadsheet of fatal traffic accidents that are occurring, and they are broken down by different data elements, including roadway classification, age of operator, if they come up positive for drugs and alcohol, and many other various data fields. I am in charge of distributing fatal crash final investigation reports to authorized individuals once a case has been approved for release and redacted to comply with New Hampshire privacy law and rules, reference RSA 260:14 and AFC 5600. Cases are requested via the DMV's DSMV 505 release of motor vehicle records form, or also requested through RSA 91-A access to governmental records. The other function is I do attend an annual conference that brings together all national FARS units to be updated by both NHTSA and NCSA on updates to the coding systems and data coding dictionaries. As far as the records that I do keep on file, I do keep physical records going back 20 years. So we are able to pull files from that distance back. Just sometimes we do get requests for old records like that, so we are able to access that. So this slide goes over what those key documents are of a fatal traffic accident file. So the major kind of spine to any fatal traffic accident file is the basic police accident report. That form is the New Hampshire State Form DSMV 19. It basically provides most of the exact details, what NHTSA is looking for regarding the circumstances that this fatal crash occurred in. They look for the time of day, the weather, if there's any noted vehicle defects, how many occupants are in the vehicle, the age of each occupant. They pretty much collect almost every piece of information on that police report to factor into their statistics. The next thing we look for is vital records. That is a very big deal because it can confirm if a case does or does not qualify for FARS. And then that kind of goes back to the prior slide, whether the ME determines that they died via a heart attack, or if they determine that this person was, if it was vehicular homicide, they were killed like that. Sometimes the vital record, once that case is, or once that cause is reported on there, it can tell us that this isn't a FARS case. It won't qualify as an accident for state numbers. One of the other huge documents that we look for in a FARS case is the toxicology report. The toxicology report, of course, confirms whether the operators or any of the other involved parties, whether it be a pedestrian, passenger, bicyclists, if they did show positive signs of alcohol and drugs in their system, whether they were impaired, whether they had none of that in their system. Impairment being an ever-present cause of fatal crashes, it is a very important source document for us to have. As part of a FARS case, they do just kind of look for a general driver and vehicle registration record overview. I think what the program is aiming for is to see if people with a history of past violations are more likely to get into crashes. And then lastly, the police final investigation report is kind of the final piece of the puzzle, so to speak, for a fatal traffic accident. It can confirm causation of a fatal crash if the initial investigation does not indicate, which often is the case. The initial police report can provide most of the information that I need. It even provides a gist of generalized crash events, but sometimes due to the complexity of the accident or the circumstances of the accident, that full investigation is needed to determine what the actual causation is. This final investigation report, of course, it is not released by our office until given approval, and it is not released to anybody but who is deemed authorized by our release of motor vehicle records process. One other thing of note is going back to the police accident report. The one thing that I see is that the accident reports, they can vary in quality, and that comes back to basically PDs that use the older forms or the older versions of MUC, the paper forms, versus the PDs who are reporting electronically, which use the newer, more data-rich forms of MUC. The paper form, it's a shorter document. From what I've heard from a lot of agencies, it can be easier to fill out, but it is very limiting. Some of the categories are definitely more general. You can see in the new electronic forms, their data fields are broken down into a lot more exact fields, which we do need on the fatal crash end of things, just because we are trying to take every single thing into account when reporting this data and figuring out if there are small things that are being overlooked that contribute to these fatal accidents. So this is just a list of partner agencies and committees that I work with as far as analysts. The main and chief one that I work with pretty much every day, constant communication, is the Office of Highway Safety. I provide a lot of data for the annual highway safety plan in regards to the fatal statistics, the highway safety grant applications, and data requests for focused law enforcement efforts, as well as other public messaging to get out there. I work with DOT. I do provide fatality data in regards to specific highways and roadways and regions within the state in order to improve road safety designs and features. A lot of times we'll kind of drill down if stuff is happening, or if we have a spike on Route 16, or looking for a 5-year timeline of fatalities on Route 101. I will keep in contact with the DOT and kind of respond to their requests if they're looking to really drill down on that. I do take part in the Traffic Records Coordinating Committee. I provide regular updates of current traffic fatality data in regards to the timeliness of data within major data reporting systems. That the agencies that attend that include highway safety, EMS, state police, many others. Moving on, I do work with state police. I redact and distribute a lot of the final investigation reports in regards to fatal crashes to comply with the motor vehicle records requests that we do receive at DMV. It is a long process. We get a lot of requests from law offices, next of kin, insurance companies. They all need these reports to kind of evaluate and move forward. So we kind of have a good process going with that. And one of the other committees that is of major note that I work with is the Motorcycle Task Force for the state, which includes the Motorcycle Rights Organization, DMV's Motorcycle Rider Training, the Liquor Commission, the New Hampshire Automobile Dealers Association, and AAA of Northern New England. Basically, what we're doing is we are analyzing the trends in motorcycle fatalities and injuries to better determine how to focus safety messaging for New Hampshire riders and also the people that share the roadway with them. I know this year in particular, we have had a pretty big spike in motorcycle operator deaths. So it's a pretty prevalent community in the state. And we definitely want to focus on anything that will reduce these numbers. So basically how the FARS unit interacts with law enforcement. We do act as a central repository for fatal traffic accident information within the state. And as aforementioned, that includes holding on to those 20 years of physical records. We do redact and distribute fatal traffic accident investigations in compliance with the New Hampshire privacy law and rules RSA 260:14 and SAFC 5600. Of note, we don't require everybody to go through us when distributing final accidents. I know that there is wording in the law, which I had looked over with my bureau chief at times in the past, that does allow some agencies to distribute their own records if needed, but we are always here if it is something that they don't feel comfortable with. And we can also provide data and reports upon request that recognize trends among fatal traffic accidents with a focus on specific roadways, causation elements, occupants. We do provide this data to PDs. They want just kind of a snapshot of what our fatal traffic accidents look like over the last 5 to 10 years. It is something that if I do have that information, I am willing to provide. So while a lot of current data is kind of, it's not available to the public directly, just due to QC procedures and stuff like that, NHTSA does have a public-facing FARS website representing data 2021 and older that anybody is willing to, or anybody can access at the address right there on the screen. FARS provides many data tables that show a lot of breakdowns on nationwide numbers, sorted by selected fields. You can do your own customized queries to kind of determine what you're looking for. And then there is a query tool in there that allows you to really drill down into specific elements. If you are looking for certain ages, in regards to being unbelted, in regards to being on an interstate, you can fulfill these multiple criteria, and the FARS website can go ahead and generate a report for you. So these are just a couple examples of these tables that you can pull from the FARS query tool. Specifically, this was obtained through NHTSA's State Traffic Safety Information Report System, or STITSI, STSI. It is available for every single state through the DOT FARS website. Lastly, this is my contact information. If you have any questions in the future regarding the FARS program or any possible requests for data, that is the email address to reach me at, as well as the general public FARS number.
Ed, do we want to go over the data or?
Yes, actually. Let's see. So can we see the chart?
No, we still see the.
All right, let's get out of this.
Yeah, this is a great chart.
Alrighty. So because the 2022 fatal crash data is it's in processing. It's preliminary at this point, and we don't have 100% of the data we need. I did put together a pie chart just showing drug samples that were found in operators involved in the 2021 fatal crashes. Just looking at this pie chart, you can see that marijuana is undoubtedly the most prevalent one. There were 35 operators that had a positive test for marijuana in their toxicology report. Benzodiazepines and fentanyl were kind of the next biggest fields with 11 in each. Cocaine and amphetamines with 8. And then there are ketamines, opiates, morphine, buprenorphine, and just miscellaneous drugs that didn't really fit into any of those categories did represent a smaller part of that. And just looking at the bottom of the chart here, we had 118 total motor vehicle traffic fatalities in New Hampshire. 61 of the 118 were fatalities that involved a motor vehicle operator that tested positive for one or more drugs. And of the 61 drug-related fatalities, 20 also involved alcohol. All right, so next, I did pull a few charts from the annual report that I provide to Office of Highway Safety. I pulled a few of these just with kind of more of a focus on impairment. So I was just going to show those. All right. So this is just kind of, this is a general chart just showing the 5-year trend of traffic fatalities in the state of New Hampshire from 2017 to 2021. You can see going back to 2017, we had a low year. We had 102, dramatically rose to 147, and then in 2019 it dropped to 101. Since 2019, it has steadily risen. I guess maybe that's not accurate, because if we were to go 1 year further into 2022, we did end with 146. So there was a very drastic jump between 21 to 22. But it was, with the exception of 2018, which is kind of the outlier here, it was kind of a steady rise. Going to the next chart, this is just a breakdown by county of fatal traffic accidents. As we see, Hillsborough, Rockingham, and Merrimack were the highest, the kind of southernmost counties in New Hampshire, with much less occurring in kind of the central and northern counties. This is a pretty interesting graph. It's a breakdown of the fatal traffic accidents or the resulting fatalities by age. So looking at the graph, the most prevalent number in this 5-year span was the 55 to 64 age range. We have 97. And then going over, it's the 25 to 34 age range, followed by the 35 to 44. So these are definitely the kind of more areas of concern. I mean, the youth are still being represented on there. 16 to 20 is 41, 21 to 24 is 48. But it definitely shows that 55 to 64 age range are the ones that are typically ending up the victims of these fatal crashes. So this is a chart representing alcohol impaired victim fatalities from the span of 2017 to 21. We can definitely see that this has increased over time, with 2018 being the high year of 35 in that initial span, and then going to 2021, we reached that 38 number. But you can see that huge jump from 2019 to 2020 of 31. On the right here is just a chart showing the average. So while the average from 17 to 21 is initially lower than 2013 to 2017, it is still going up, and that's those last 3 fields. So it's definitely concerning. So looking at this is alcohol impairment fatal crashes by the time of day. Looking at the fields, we can see that the most typically tend to occur between the hours of 2100 to 2359. Which is 9 p.m. to 11:59 p.m. So it's at night, which with the next highest field, the 1800 to 2059, and then the midnight to 2:59 hours. So unsurprisingly, most of these alcohol impaired fatal crashes are occurring during the dark hours, which of course coincide with parties, bars, stuff like that. The breakdown by day, looking unsurprisingly, most of these are also happening Friday, Saturday, Sunday, with Wednesday also kind of breaking into the 20s for the 5-year span. So that would, I guess, coincide with kind of more recreational alcohol-based activities occurring on the weekends. These were alcohol-impaired fatal crashes by month. So going down this, we can see that there's some variance. We have the warmer months, June and August, representing the highest numbers. December, actually surprisingly low. We have alcohol impairment by county, and this is counting crashes, not fatalities. So looking down, we have, I mean, the number that really sticks out is Hillsborough with 42, followed by Rockingham with 35. It's a pretty big drop off to the rest. I think the next highest after that is Merrimack, which lines up with the 3 counties with the most fatalities, but it's dropping from 35 to 16, which is it's very large, very noticeable. And lastly, we do have a chart representing motorcyclist fatalities involving operator impairments. So looking over this, it's definitely a weird trend, starting at 4, going to 11, going back to 4, and then just maintaining at 11. But I think it does show that the motorcyclist community, they are very much at risk when it comes to alcohol impairment, whether it be impaired riders or impaired drivers running into them. It's definitely an area of focus.
Okay, is that the last chart, Ian?
That is the last one.
All right. So I guess basically I'll go into the presentation about the crash data analysis system, and let me just okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see this?
Yeah, we can see it, Paul. There is a chat question for Ian. I didn't know if you...
I didn't see that. Okay, I'm not sure what is it. Okay, do you see more distracted drivers or drunk drivers?
So in reviewing the police cases that I have, distraction it's something that it's trickier to prove in a fatal crash, especially if there is only one kind of person involved. So I guess the quick answer there is we do tend to see more fatal crashes caused by impairment rather than distraction, by a pretty big number usually. It doesn't mean that distraction isn't playing a part, but sometimes just reviewing the crashes, it seems like it's something that's harder to drill down into and definitively get an answer for in police investigations.
Okay, I don't. Any others at all? James,
Nope,
anything?
That was it, and that person thanked Ian.
Okay, very good. All right, and you know, Ian does a fantastic job over there with with the FARS work. It's a lot of data, and dealing with the fatalities, the crash fatalities. So that makes up part of the totality of crashes that we have in New Hampshire. Thankfully, not all of them are fatalities, but there is standard crash data that the state has. There are thousands of crashes every year. Obviously, some are fatals. Some have injuries. Others are classified as property damage or no property damage. So how do we make sense of the data, of the information? Well, you know, what we strive to do is, you know, the victims of these crashes, so that it's not in vain. We try and use this data to save lives, to save other lives on the road. So the data that Ian compiles, the data that the DMV compiles, is used in our efforts to direct our funding, our efforts, our crash prevention efforts. So how to best use that data? How do you best use the fatality data and the non-fatality crash data to best effect? So each crash, well, regardless of whether it's a fatality or non-fatality, there's important information that's contained in the crash reports themselves. Number one is crash location. That is key. And the more accurate the location, the better. And the ideal way to capture that location data is through geolocation. And that is by pulling kind of latitude and longitude GPS data, as opposed to any other data that's not as accurate. So the ideal of location that we're looking for, the holy grail, so to speak, is GPS data or geolocation. That's why we strive to do to kind of have departments using an electronic method of submission, which collects a lot more granular data in the crashes. Of course, another important element is the date and the time of the crash, of course, and you saw Ian gave an example of the fatalities, what day of the week. You know, you can even look at the time that they occurred. Crash type, did it involve another motor vehicle? Was it a single vehicle? Did it involve a pedestrian? Did the vehicle hit a fixed object, an animal, etc.? So there's the type of crash that occurs is important as well. Were there injuries or no injuries? Was a person ejected from the vehicle during the crash or not? Action before and after a crash. What was the vehicle doing before the crash? And then what happened after the crash? Was the vehicle skidding before the crash? Was it speeding before the crash? What have you? After the crash, did it go off the road? Did it hit another vehicle? So there's a lot of these elements that are involved in each crash. Each crash tells a story. Contributing factors. So what are the contributing factors that may have affected it? Was it speed? Was it inattention? Was it a novice driver or what have you? So contributing factors are important as well. Weather and road conditions. Did the road conditions impact how the vehicle was able to maneuver? So did it have any, was it a contributing factor in the crash? So what's the most effective way to visualize and analyze crash data? Well, if you can kind of picture it in your mind, if you know what an Excel spreadsheet looks like, think of a pile, kind of like 2 feet high. To go through all that data, each one of those crashes are involved in an annual kind of totality. To look at all those crashes individually, how could you look at that data and make sense of it? That's a ton of data. And each one of those entries contain, a description of what was going on with the vehicle at the time of the crash. So what's the best way to look at that? You can't, to sit there and kind of analyze it with a magnifying glass, and those days are gone, because we're dealing with so much granular data that it's important to find a way to gather it and to analyze it. So the best way to do that is with GIS technology, and that's a geographic information system. And what that is, in essence, is pulling the location data from any source of geolocation, whether it's GPS data, if a police car that's on the scene of a crash pulls the GPS data of that location, that's a great location. That's the way to do it. If it's down the street some, or if they're using an address that's not quite there, or an intersection that's not quite as close to a crash location, that data starts to kind of spread out and not be as accurate. And accurate information is key. And GIS is really the only way to visualize that data in a kind of accurate way. So a GIS technology allows you to kind of, I guess in more condensed terms than what you see here, is to gather many different pieces of data into a kind of comprehensive picture of the crash. And it allows you to, I guess, visualize different types of spatial data and telemetric data. And I'll go into kind of what that is. Probably the best way to show you is to kind of show you what I'm talking about. So this is a crash data management system from Massachusetts. So this is their dashboard, and it's possible to look at this in a nutshell and visualize the crash data that has occurred in Massachusetts. Now, this is what they call a static display. Now, this display is aggregated manually. So you see here, this has to be entered, or an algorithm pulls this data from their crash data records management system at their DMV. And it kind of condenses it in a way that you can visualize the crashes. You can do searches, you can zoom in, you can analyze different crashes that occur, and fatality crashes, property damage crashes, causation, type of crash, and what have you, totality of crashes. You can kind of do a lot of different searches with this. Ideally, this is a great system, but the best way to I guess consume the data is not with a static display, although that's good for searches, range searches, but it's with an active GIS crash data mapping system. So there's a difference between static and active. So the active crash data system that we're looking at purchasing, it's coming up soon, allows us to layer telemetric and attribute data over crash data. So your crash data is at the base, and you have different layers on top of the crash data. So you're able to look at the picture in totality of the picture of the crash. And if you kind of visualize that each of these layers are information points, such as what was the temperature of the roadway at the time of the crash? What were the ambient conditions? Was it snowing? Was it raining? And also, there's also data as far as ambient speed data of the roadway. What was the speed at the time? So there's actual data feeds that you can layer on top of the crashes, speed data, weather data, as I said, various types of other data as far as citation data, e-citation data, like where tickets, citations are being written by officers. Are they in locations where the crash indicates where that activity should be, where those efforts, enforcement efforts or educational efforts, where does the data point you to direct your resources? So when you have a lot of different layers coming in to be layered over the crash data, you can build a pretty detailed picture of what caused that crash. And the more data you have, the more granular data that you have about a crash, the more you can predict when another crash will happen. It sounds kind of, a lot of people look at that and they use the term AI. which is artificial intelligence. So when a system analyzes the data, that much data, it kind of, you have to use an algorithm, and that algorithm actually learns from the past crashes and looks for patterns that repeat itself, and will actually alert you when crashes are likely to happen in a certain area. So this is an example of a crash system. This is Washington, D.C., of the kind of crash data system, what they're capable of doing at this point. And once again, technology has moved on quite a bit from static GIS platforms to where now you have actual AI integration into the system itself. So a lot of times, if location is not as accurate as it should be, an algorithm can actually scan the information in the officer's report and move the crash to where it's supposed to be. Because sometimes there's errant crash locations. And instead of manually going in and doing it, the algorithm actually looks at the narrative and repositions the crash location according to the narrative, whether it's the street name, the intersection name, or it pulls the data out from the narrative. If there's no geolocation data. Ideally, we want that geolocation data. So here's a kind of a bird's eye view, and this shows what layering does. Once again, DOT is a very strong partner of ours, and they similarly use this type of data. They look at road design issues and what have you, and they got a fantastic team over there headed by Bill Lambert, and they study these crashes, you know, and look for any type of design issues or situations that they might be able to kind of correct or what have you, or if a design was an issue. Instead of, in our aspect, we look at behavior. Was it a behavioral issue? Was somebody speeding? Was, you know, what type of, was there a human factor involved in the crash? And once again, you can visualize key data like enforcement efforts. You can lay over e-citation data, severity, weather, collision type, location type, and you can even go down to street level with satellite imagery. And this even has 3D, this type of system has 3D rendering. So you can actually go down into an intersection into kind of like a 3D kind of visualization to kind of get a closer look at the crash location. So a heat map. Heat map kind of shows you where your areas of crashes are, where they're concentrated. And once again, you can layer data such as licensed drinking establishments, places of worship, schools, cameras, streetlights, traffic signals. You can layer all this data over the crash data, once again. So this allows you to build, once again, a pretty detailed picture of what was going on at the time of that crash. So queries. So let's say, and once again, this system will have the ability to kind of use this system in this fashion, and the public will also be able to do, they'll have a public-facing dashboard like you saw with Massachusetts, and the public will be able to do some searches and looking at data. And mind you, the data that we use, we're very cognizant of the driver privacy law in New Hampshire, and we're very respectful of that, all of us here at the DOS and DOT everywhere. All the state agencies are cognizant of that. We take very much care in making sure that no personal identifiable information is used. None of the information that we have contains PII, a personally identifiable information. So it's not, what's more important when you're looking at data and analysis is, once again, the location, and the circumstances around the crash. So you'll be able to do certain ranges of searches, different categories of searches to kind of look at the crashes in an area. You'll also be able to analyze the neighborhood. So fingerprint analysis, not the fingerprint as in when a police officer prints somebody or looks for fingerprints. A fingerprint analysis as far as when you're looking at communities and looking where the crashes occur. Once again, this is layered over crash data. You're looking at the neighborhoods in a kind of a you analyze what that community is made up of socioeconomically, demographically, as far as how many people are in a certain area. So you can look and see if crashes are occurring predominantly in underrepresented areas. So you can kind of like focus your efforts where the crashes occur. Yeah, or you can address your highway safety education efforts into areas where crashes are occurring. So it kind of allows you to better focus all your resources in areas where the data indicates that it should be. And so once again, custom dashboards can be built. Once again, the public can visualize the type of dashboard that they need. Also, as well as the Department of Safety and DOT will be able to look at this data and kind of use it in a way to generate reports. So we'll be able to generate a report from this. And the key to this type of system is having data at your fingertips. Once again, static and active. A static display, you need to update periodically. This type of system that we're looking at pulls data on a nightly basis. So if we were to have, let's say, a mobilization, let's say the hands-free mobilization, which I believe a lot of you have heard of, or the move over mobilizations. Well, we can do a search of that certain time period of that mobilization and pull that data immediately. How many citations were written? Were there any crashes during that time, or what have you? But it'll allow you to do almost a real-time kind of query of the information that you're looking for. And once again, predictive analysis, as I said, otherwise known as AI, artificial intelligence. And all that means is that there's an algorithm in place that can look at the multitude of data points, thousands and thousands and thousands of data points involved in these crashes. So, once again, each crash contains many, many data points, and multiply that times thousands. So the only way to digest it is through an algorithm. And that algorithm will once again look for patterns. And when a similar pattern, let's say the predominantly crashes are occurring at this location on a Tuesday between the hours of 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. In this certain area, when the weather conditions are such, on the traffic, the ambient traffic speed is such, and it will tell you the range, the predictive kind of like percentage that the crashes may be occurring in a certain area during a certain time period, which allows us to do what? To focus our efforts and to kind of get, before the crash occurs, kind of get resources to a location. So we'd be able to kind of proactively have our partners in law enforcement to alert them to areas that the system indicates the higher percentage of crashes during a certain time period, and alert them so that they might be able to pre-position assets should they have them available. And once again, there's countermeasures. As our office, we have countermeasures that we use that are standardized that comes out from NHTSA. Certain countermeasures to deal with crashes and crash locations. The DOT has similar things. They have countermeasures as well. So we all have kind of like standards that NHTSA or Federal Highway kind of provide that they're best, that works best, that they found through trial and error and the historical kind of record that these countermeasures work better than others. So collision diagrams, once again, you'll be able to kind of look at crashes granularly and kind of analyze, once again, what was going on at the time of the crash. Where was the pedestrian? Where was the vehicle? You know, where was the other vehicles in relation to the crash? And I guess that's it. I don't know if there's any questions at all, or.
There currently is not any in chat.
Okay. I
Go
guess
all
that's
set.
it. Yes.
Paul, thanks so much. Another great presentation by Paul Ruggiero. Paul is working diligently on this whole Office of Highway Safety crash data dashboard. He's taken a lead role on this. It's a lot of work, a lot of legwork on top of some of the other projects he's working on. He's a project specialist through our office. Can't thank you enough, Paul. And this is actually good timing because many of our police departments right now are submitting that, as Ian had mentioned, submitting that Mach 5 crash report to Vision electronically. When we get everybody involved, all of our law enforcement submitting that electronic crash report to Vision, certainly that's going to give us most of the data that we need that is going to go within this crash data dashboard to be able to query many different things. And I tell you, when I say this will change, this is a game changer. When you talk about the crash data dashboard, it certainly will be. I mean, we'll be able to, look at the data throughout the state of New Hampshire. Problem areas, an example would be, let's just say that we're seeing many impairment-related crashes occurring in Manchester. We would be able to look at that. We would be able to query that data, and that we might use media messaging to geofence that whole area to inform everyone in that location that we've got a real problem with impairment. So it's that quick and it's that timely it can be. And it's just a huge game changer. So Paul, appreciate that. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Yes. So in closing, again, just great presentations, all through this series. In closing, I'd like to thank all presenters who have taken the time out of their busy schedules to give such great presentations. Also, just a reminder, tomorrow will be the last day of this series, which will begin again at 11 and run through 1 p.m. Also like to remind all attendees that the recordings of these presentations will be sent out to you to review at your leisure. And lastly, I'd like to thank all of you who attended this Impaired Driving Conference. Again, our mantra is there's no office, agency, institution, organization, or partner that can reduce crashes and the resulting injuries and/or deaths alone. Only together, in this partnership, working together, can we make a difference. I wish you all a great remainder of your day and look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. So have a great day. Thank you very much.
Oh, there's a person still there.
Oh, you gotta end the meeting.
I did.
Why? That's why the meeting isn't ended.
There's
You
two,
see the
Oh,
down
there's two
arrow
people
next to
here.
leave? You see the down arrow? Click end meeting.
Are you serious?